Iowa's News Now Sports has your all-access pass to all things Hawkeyes. This is Eye on the Hawks.
Look it down! We play football! Boomski!
Attack your life with the enthusiasm that YA Black tackles being mic'd up for Hawkeye football practice. Didn't know he could hit those octaves. Love to see it. Welcome to Eye on the Hawks. This is our 2024 season preview edition. Mitch Vick, Owen Sebring, Mike Howell here. We've got lots to get to, including a look at the quarterback battle, competition, whatever you want to call it. We're going to hear from Phil Parker for the first time. Yep. Not injured and missing media day, but he is recovering right now.
Not in a sling anymore, but in a fake sling, self-made sling.
No big deal until you hear about what happened to him. He'll get through that. And then we're going to go through our season predictions. We'll look at all the regular season games, our offensive MVP, our defensive MVP, our breakout players, our bold predictions, best worst case scenarios. Lots to get to here, certainly. Of course, if you're watching on YouTube live, we thank you, or afterwards. Thank you. This is where you get all your visuals, all our videos, all our interview pieces as well. If you're listening to the podcast, of course, you got that option too. Follow us on the Iowa's News Now YouTube channel or Instagram page, and Eye on the Hawks on Twitter and or X. We start, though, with the latest from camp. We are 10 days out. Nick Jackson, Nathan Chandler days away. Mekhi Sargent days away. Deacon Hill days away from that opener against Illinois State, August 31st, coming up at Kinnick Stadium. It sounds like after fall scrimmage and the stats, whatever those mean about Cade and Brendan and what's happening, it sounds like things have smoothed out. I know the Big Ten Network team was in Iowa City not too long ago. It sounds like the competition, the work continues. How do we feel? Do we have feelings a week and a half out now about what the quarterback situation is or is going to be or anything like that?
I'm really surprised that it does seem to keep getting turned into a little bit of a battle, and not necessarily just from media types, but it seems like that is a little bit from the inside as well, that this is a little bit of a battle going on right now. Last year, that was not the case. I mean, even from the spring, Kirk talked about how Cade McNamara was going to be the starting quarterback, pretty much bar none, no matter what, he was a starter. But this year, that is less of a sure thing. It seems like Brendan Sullivan keeps nipping at those heels and has at least it within his power to possibly be a starting quarterback this year.
Yeah, Kirk said a ton of times this camp through the media to name a starter, and he hasn't done so. Although all the glimpses we've seen, Cade's pretty much 95% taking snaps with the ones, outside of a few. At Kids Day, at the end of the practice, when Brandon got in there, BTN special on Friday, all the images I could see looked to be the number one offensive line with Cade, number two is with Brendan, but still no quarterback has been named. Maybe next Tuesday we find out officially that Cade will get the job, but I think it's definitely, I would be surprised if he doesn't take the first snap a week from Saturday.
I think Cade's the starting quarterback too. We've been over that. I do think, though, you're in this very advantageous situation, particularly compared to last year, where, yeah, why not have them compete, even though they're probably solid number one, solid number two. But again, you didn't have really the ability, the experience to have that iron sharpens iron mentality and philosophy they wanted to last year, because your number two had handed off a couple times at Wisconsin and really hadn't had any other experience. So, Mike, thank you for putting this together. This is kind of a look side by side of what that quarterback room was last year going into camp. So 2023 there on the right side, you had Cade McNamara, 2021 Big Ten champion, had led the Wolverines to that undefeated season and had done everything you would want a steady and strong quarterback to do. Your number two is Deacon Hill, coming in out of Wisconsin. Again, took minimal snaps where he didn't throw the ball at all in Madison. He came in and, we heard plenty of times in the narrative of you can't microwave experience. It was very apparent, obviously, that there just wasn't a lot of experience behind Cade. Joe Labus went into the bowl game, performed admirably, didn't have to do a whole lot, but 1-0 as a starter at Iowa, and it sounds like he'll be the guy in Mount Pleasant, Michigan, starting for the Chippewas of Central Michigan. Nice. And then your fourth quarterback, Marco Lainez, a guy who was a year into the program, hadn't played, saw him a little bit there in the bowl game last year. Tommy Pahalski, now at Colorado State, who was a walk-on who hadn't played and
QB swap, huh?
Probably wasn't going to play at Iowa. Yeah, that was the trade for Jackson Stratton. That was the move there. So you fast forward to 2024. Oh, and by the way, in 2023, your offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach was Brian Ferentz, a former offensive lineman. 2024, Cade McNamara, still your number one quarterback. A few more starts, another knee injury though. Now your number 2 quarterback is Brendan Sullivan, a guy who has started a handful of games in the Big Ten, a guy who has won games in the Big Ten and not just been the starter when the win comes. He has willed his team and performed to a level that was winning football. Go watch that Maryland tape last year at Northwestern. That was a fun game, in large part because of Brendan Sullivan's performance. Your number 3 is now Marco Lainez, who took some snaps in, if you want to paint it as garbage time in the bowl game, but showed, hey, there's an element here. We can move the feet a little bit. We can make some plays. So he's a little bit more experienced than number 3, arguably as much as maybe Joey was in terms of what he was asked to do and performing a little bit more even in a disadvantage. I don't know what word I'm saying. It was a tough spot Marco went into, and he performed about as well as you could ask for in terms of just trying to make plays. Now your number 4 quarterback, we're going to assume James Razor is going to redshirt the freshman out of Florida. But now Jackson Stratton comes after 2 years at Colorado State, where he threw 17 passes. He went 4-17, whatever, but he's thrown live Division I passes. So all of a sudden, your number 4 this year has way more experience than your number 4 last year. Your number 3, comparable experience to last year. Your number 2, light years ahead of last year's number 2. Oh, by the way, your offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach is a former quarterback himself who has documented success coaching up other quarterbacks. One at his alma mater in Tim Hiller at Western Michigan when he was the quarterbacks coach. And also when he returned there as a head coach, Johnny Wasink, who was West Michigan's version of Johnny Football coming out of South Christian High School. He was great for the Broncos, as well as Caleb Ellaby, who was a heck of a quarterback for Western Michigan as well. So the rooms are so much different. The experience is so much different that I think you'd almost be happy to have competition because you don't have just one guy who's got all the experience. It trickles down. And again, iron sharpens iron. I think you like to have the opportunity to have these dudes push each other. That's what you want, I think, across the board, particularly a quarterback.
It's good news for Hawkeye fans across the board, for sure, just because you have those 2 quarterbacks not only pushing each other, but more of a safety net if something happens to Cade McNamara. It's bad news if you're the Hawkeye coaching staff because they know that if Cade shows any sign of struggle, they're going to be getting questions right away about like, when are you going to put in Brendan? Are you going to give Brendan a shot? I mean, that's something that they faced last year when, I think even in the first game that Deacon played in, Kirk was getting questions afterwards, well, did you think about putting in Joe Labus? Yeah. So that's going to be from the first point that Cade struggles this year. There's going to be questions about like, well, when are you going to put in Brendan Sullivan? So that's, they're going to field those questions if Cade struggles, and they're going to deal with that all year if it goes that way. But overall, I think that Hawkeye fans at least have to be happier with the backup situation this year.
Yeah, 100%. I think if we get down to the QB3, then it's not going to be. There's going to be a kind of a nightmare scenario anyway, so so prepare.
The RPO maybe becomes a little more RO.
But the one thing,
all due respect to Marco,
if Cade does struggle or get hurt again, Brendan Sullivan, the one thing I'm really encouraged about is he almost threw for 70% completion percentage at Northwestern. That's almost the exact opposite of what we got last year out of our backup quarterback. So if someone come in and complete those, intermediate passes, pick up first downs and second and third down, make this offense get a couple first downs instead of going 3 and out, that's infinitely better than what we saw for like 9 games last season. So
the whole room's elevated, and again, I think that's where you get encouraged. And again, David Blau is another guy that Tim Lester coached up when he was QB coach at Purdue. I blanked on that one.
Shame on you. Mitch mentioned that the number 2 QB spot was light years ahead of number 2 last year. I might even go so far as to say is that the QB3 on this year's depth chart is light years ahead of the number 2 on last year's roster. All due respect to Deacon Hill, who we liked a lot as a person and was a fun guy to talk to, but I would feel a lot more comfortable with Marco Lainez coming in there at quarterback than I would at Deacon Hill for a Hawkeye.
Yeah, again, it was just so you can't microwave experience, and even Deacon kind of finished our sentence at one point when I asked him about that question earlier. It's a tough thing, but you are a year ahead, and there is just so much more experience, and again, a guy leading the offense now who has been a quarterback and a darn good quarterback during his playing days and certainly as a position coach as well. The whole room's elevated.
Sidebar, one of my interesting, or one things I'm looking forward to next week is watching Central Michigan and Utah Tech.
Sure.
Central Michigan plays on Thursday.
Utah State too.
Yeah, I forgot about Utah State.
I want to go see Spencer rip it up.
Central Michigan plays Central Connecticut State on Thursday at 6. So we can see if I was trying to look to see if Joey was the first QB1 at Central Michigan. It looks like there's a little bit of a battle. Some websites have him, others have Bert Manuel, I believe his name is. Anyway, I'm excited to see him play, and then Utah Tech plays on Saturday against, like, I can't remember the team, but it's a one of those FCS teams, I believe. So we'll see. I couldn't find any information on Utah Tech's depth chart either, but you have to assume Deacon's the starter there. If he's not, that's concerning that.
We've heard otherwise. Actually, they got a tough opener going against number 4 Montana State. So.
Oh yes, Montana State. Yeah,
might get work in week 1.
And Utah State, Spencer Petras, who's the starter there, they open up at home against Robert Morris, then they go to Big Ten power USC. So that's their second game. They've got Utah State. They go to USC, then they come home and host Utah, a team a lot of people think can go win the Big 12 there. So that's a fun one.
Is Deuce Hogan going to be the starter at New Mexico State?
Deuce Hogan and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Cade's brother are battling out for the starting spot at New Mexico State.
It all ties back. It seems like we're in a simulation.
Iowa really is QB-U.
That's
it all comes together.
Again, it's just
If the U stands for Utah.
There we go. All right, from offense to defense, again, we alluded to it in the open. Phil Parker wasn't at media day, or not, wasn't there for questions at media day as he was away. He is injured, not hurt, but he is on the road to recovery. He described this as no big deal. Apparently, during the summer, he got bumped. His arm moved the wrong way. He tore a bicep, a labrum, and his
Rotator cuff.
Rotator cuff.
I've done that one. That one sucks.
Not according to Phil Parker.
He
acted like a fly buzzed in it.
I sprained my rotator cuff. I couldn't lift it above right here.
Yeah,
There's just tough people, and I'm not one of them, I guess.
I think he said he was going in for an evaluation yesterday and is starting to get into physical therapy. He didn't have the sling on, but just keeping the arm steady there. But obviously he didn't just get questions about his own injuries, but talking about the secondary and the battles there. A couple of injuries at the safety spot too. So here's Phil, 11 days out from the opener, talking yesterday about what the secondary is looking like going into the 2024 opener.
Cohen's been practicing the last couple of days. He's doing a good job. I think he's back. We're just limiting some of his reps and watch we don't overload him. And then Xavier, it looks like he's back at it. He should be. I thought he was going to practice here today a little bit, but I think he should be back in the next couple of days. Well, I think it's really interesting. Jamari Harris has come back and the leadership that he's brought, and seeing TJ Hall grow and improve his standard of play. Nestor, he's really doing a good job, very competitive out there. And Deshaun Lee's doing a heck of a job. So, it's really interesting to see those 4 over there. And one day, one guy might have a better day than the other guy. It's depending on what day and at the point of attack, how productive are they. But I think they're all into it. They're all working hard. And, you can see, maybe playing more guys in the back end if you have to.
So Cohen and Xavier back at practice again, banged up in the middle of August. That's probably going to happen at fall camp. We spoke about this a little bit when John was listed as one of the starting cornerbacks going into fall camp. And again, talk about having an advantage and a better situation in the quarterback room. On the secondary side, you've got 4 defensive backs. Some have started, the others have really good potential, but you got 4 guys that you feel like could start. That's a nice problem to have, and it sounds like they're just kind of letting things play out no matter what that, again, the fall depth chart on July 31st said.
Yeah, that's an awesome problem to have because you like your Jamari Harris. He's your leader on the defense. So it's graduate. You have so many graduates on the defense. And then that second spot, last at Kids Day, it was TJ Hall. John Nestor was on the depth chart at number 1 there. And then Deshaun Lee started 6 games last year. So, I think you're pretty comfortable. And God forbid there's an injury on that line. At least there's some starting experience depth chart or depth back there. So corner's got to be one of your, deepest positions, I think, heading into the season.
Yeah, I know in a little bit we're going to be talking about defensive MVP this year, and it's like, you've got about 7 guys there back in the secondary and the linebacker core that could be in the running for that this year. That's one of the tougher spots to pick just because there's so many good guys that not only could be the defensive MVP, but good breakout players. A kid like Zach Lutmer. I feel like we even talked about Zach all the way last year, but especially this season in the spring and in the fall now, Zach Lutmer is a guy that a lot of people are starting to talk about as maybe the next kid to step in there and prove himself at the DB spot.
We always start hearing about guys during bowl prep who are the freshmen and the young guys that are popping, and yeah, number 6 certainly popped into attention and has continued to do that as we get into the fall. So let's turn to our season predictions because 'tis the season to get these things going. So again, we're going to go through offensive MVP, defensive MVP, breakout player, bold predictions, and then we'll get into our game-by-game regular season predictions. So Mike, who is a graphics extraordinaire, has put together a lot of fantastic visuals. Just another reason to get onto the YouTube channel and watch these things live or after the fact. If you are just listening to the audio version, make Mike's work worth it. That's all we ask.
Go to YouTube, subscribe.
Go to YouTube.
Subscribe, like, rate, review.
Smash that like button.
Such an Mike, never say smash that like button. Please don't do that. Be you. So we're going to start with offensive MVP, or we're going to?
Yeah. Okay. So last year we did like Owen listed his off. I think it's better just to go through the one topic and then we can go through
Absolutely.
it. So offensive MVP is first, and so I've seen all of them because I made the graphics, but you guys haven't seen them, and you'll be surprised to see that you guys have the same guy on offense.
Do we really?
Wow, really? Oh, man, I thought I was breaking outside the box.
Samesies. I think. Listen. He's your best player on offense.
Yep.
I think that's the argument. You know, he misses so much time last year, but when he's healthy, he is one of the top 3 tight ends in the country. There's probably a pretty good argument he is number 1. Mm-hmm. And this could be a Mackey Award-winning season. You've got not just a program that traditionally likes to use their tight ends. Your new offensive coordinator came in. One of the first things I heard about him, and then he certainly confirmed it, is that he loves a tight end who can catch passes. Welcome to the neighborhood, bud. So Luke Lachey just feels like he can set up to really have a really great year.
A guy who, if he hadn't been injured early in the year, he would certainly, without a doubt, be playing in the NFL right now. I mean, he's an NFL caliber tight end
100%.
right now, and he's going to be back playing for the Hawkeyes this year. So he's just such a good, I mean, every quarterback, especially if you're new to the program like Brendan is, or coming back from an injury like Cade, everybody needs a safety net, and Luke is the perfect safety net for these guys to just throw these short little passes, let him go scramble for another 10 yards. Luke's just the full package at tight end. Actually, if I hadn't picked Luke, I was going to pick your pick for the offensive MVP.
So no doubt, Luke will be the top pass catcher, and I believe that in my heart. But will the pass game struggle early on? I think it will in the first half. I think the offensive line is better than it was last year. Another year gelling. They played pretty well on the kids' day. That's why I think a running back will get it. The only issue is like last year, there's going to be a committee, and who knows, Wisconsin, it was LaShawn Williams. Caleb Johnson had his game against Illinois. It was just different game, different back. I really like what I see out of Caleb Johnson. He just looks like an NFL body. I don't know if he'll play at the next level, but that's what I see when I go to practices and stuff. He's just big, he's fast, and explosive. So I think he's going to be a leading rusher this year.
Tell me if I'm wrong. Didn't Mitch and I pick Caleb Johnson as our offensive MVP last year?
We really need to start talking about these before we just to try to get some. But I believe we both had Caleb Johnson. Yeah. Who did you? Do you remember who you had?
I think I went with Cade.
Okay. Yeah. And I think again that was probably what dissuaded me this year, was just how much talent is in that running back room this year, because we've got Caleb.
It's just going to be tough
LaShawn.
for one of them to stand out. But I do think that he will get over 1,000 yards this year. So.
Yep.
There you go. All right, defensive MVP. Let's go to the next slide here.
Do we have some variety here?
Hey, okay.
There's another.
Samesies again, but hey, and we just alluded to this. You have so many guys back for a 6th year that you've got 8 options on defense, and everyone has got an argument of it. There's no wrong answer to this. The whole defense is the MVP, and they have been the last couple of years. But Owen J. Higgins, you can't argue with a guy who tied the single-season record in tackles last year.
Yeah,
and
it was
setting up.
It was going to be Higgins or Castro for me as well. I'm glad that I at least zigged where you guys zagged towards Castro. I think that with the amount of tackles he put up last year, I feel like there was a little bit of like he wanted it. And Mike and I were at that bowl game where like there were a couple plays where, upon reflection, it's like that should have been a tackle for him. Like there was a play where I'm rehashing stuff from 8 months ago, but.
Yeah.
He tackled the Tennessee guy. He should have been down at the 1-yard line. They ruled it a touchdown. I was already, getting blown out, so it's like nobody even bothered to replay it. But it's like if they would have done the replay, they would have ruled him down. He would have gotten that tackle to set the record rather than tying it.
Yeah.
It's annoying to me when a record does not stand that should. But I think that Jay Higgins is going to be chasing that again this year. I see another potential 150-plus tackle season for him. It's going to depend on what happens in the postseason. If they make a Big Ten championship game, that's going to rely on, or that's going to depend, that will dictate how many tackles he gets at the end of the year, how many postseason games they get. So depend on that a little bit. But I think that he's just such a solid leader, vocal leader, mental, emotional leader, that is what makes him the MVP in my book.
Let me ask you a question before we get to ours. Because he led the team in almost the nation in tackles last year. Was he the MVP last year too, would you say? Or I know Cooper got hurt, but wouldn't you say Cooper was the defensive MVP or Joe Evans led, in sacks last year? Like, that's why I was going to go with Jay, but I was like, man, he's going to get this, a lot of tackles, but is he going to make that impact like I think it's Sebastian Castro will?
Jay just has that consistent excellence that it's just, and again, we talked about the Utah State game, the opener. That's like the quietest 18 tackle performance you could ask for, but it's just he's your Mike and he's everywhere, and it's just immense production, which is partially because Jay is a stud, partially because it's the job of the Mike. Is you get in there on every single play, and he just does it at such a high level. It is, and he's a fantastic leader on top of it. It's so tough to there's never any, I don't want to shortchange him in any way, shape, or form, but the standard is just so high for him in that position that there's no game where he quote unquote takes over, because it's just consistently he's there every single time. There's no takeover because he just kind of owns the spot.
I think he quite literally was the most valuable person or player on the team.
I'd agree with that.
But when you look at an MVP and you're making picks like that, you want to see,
some interceptions.
taking over the game. And he did pick off Hudson Card last year, but
his first pick since his junior year of high school,
So it's just one of those things where when you look at MVP, you want to look at a bigger impact where Seb had several forced turnovers, picks 6 against Iowa State, that game-clinching INT against Wisconsin. The Wisconsin game he took over, by the way.
That was kind of, that's how I looked at it, is your MVP the guy who is setting the standard, and there's certainly an argument for that, and there's no wrong answer here. But I try to think, is there a game where one defensive guy just owned it, and you just go back to Madison, where 7 or 8 tackles, and every one of those tackles, you're like, geez, how's he doing that? And then gets the pick at the end. He had that hit on the 4th down that was, I think, they probably stopped him short, but they somehow recovered the fumble, and it was a first down. Maybe I'm misremembering that, but just every play in that game, and you're like, he was the MVP of that game, and it's performances like that can kind of elevate everybody and kind of sets the tone, and all those superlatives you can say. So that's why I also just thought Jay was a very easy answer, and I wanted to be different.
Yeah.
Clearly I wasn't different because Mike thought the same.
Yeah. But there was even, there were 2 or 3 other guys on the defense that I was like, I don't know, maybe it's a defensive end who really breaks out this year and has a bunch of sacks. There's a lot of guys that, we could look, if you examine at the end of the year who was a defensive MVP, there's about 6 guys on that defensive lineup that could qualify.
Y.A. Black's going to be up there. Quinn Schulte kind of
Aaron Graves.
the same cloth. Aaron Graves, just because Quinn's such a leader there, and we hear everybody talk so highly about Quinn. Jamari Harris could go off and have 6.
Oh, sure, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Forgot about him. How could I?
Great problem to have. You've got 7 grads or whatever it is on that defense.
Xavier, it's does Wampa really break out this year and have a few more?
Can I just do sidebar a Hawkeye trivia question? I was looking up because you brought up sacks.
Allowed.
All right, so on the college football stats, it only goes till 2005 where I could track team stats, but there's only 3 guys since 2005, for Iowa, who've had over double-digit sacks.
In a single season?
In a single season. Can you name them?
Is Claiborne one of them?
Claiborne was one of them.
Was that 2010 or 2009?
2009.
2009. Joe last year? Joe had 4 in the bowl game, right?
He had 9.5 last year.
Oh, wow.
So just barely. Joe led or tied the past 3 seasons. I kind of forgot that he was that good at sacking the quarterback.
Didn't he finish 2nd all time in sacks, or 4th, something like that?
Something like that. I don't know the exact number.
I don't know. I'm bad at some of these Hawkeye trivia questions. You guys are way better than me. Looking at Mitch.
Oh, why am I blanking? He was Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year in 2020. Why am I blanking on his name? Why am I blanking?
Chauncey Golson?
Davion Nixon?
Or Davion Nixon.
Davion Nixon.
He did not, only because that year there was only 8 games. So
Oh, yeah.
in 2020.
I don't know. If anybody was going to do it in an 8-game season.
Him and Golson finished with 5.5. So I think that was just a lack of games.
Yeah, I still remember that Penn State game. That was just
Yeah.
yep, you're very, very good.
I'm just, again, going into recent history since I've been working in this area, but Van Valkenburg, I don't suppose, got there?
No.
Van Ness?
Yeah, Van Ness.
He did not get it. He got 7 in a 21, tied with Evans. Yeah. AJ Epinesa did it twice.
Really?
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah, in 2019 he had 11 and a half.
happened to him?
In 2018 he had 10 and a half. So it was another because his brother committed last week, just another recent tie to that. So yeah, just wanted to. That's kind of crazy though. I think
Nixon.
Yeah.
Right at Kenosha. That's, I feel terrible. Again, 2020 is such a weird blur, too.
It was,
Just
yeah.
Like, oh, yeah, that team, like, was maybe the best team in the Big Ten at the end of that season. And then remember the Michigan game gets canceled because of COVID. They were supposed to go play Missouri in the Music City Bowl. And so, like, that season ended very strangely, as strange as a season as it was on its face. So just some of that stuff gets blurred out. They beat Michigan State 45-0 or whatever it was in that game. Remember that? That was wild. I'm just trying to make up for the fact that I forgot a name, and now I just want to cover it up with stuff I do remember. Breakout player. One of the names actually was just named here, and I've got a couple weird picks for this, but I'm interested to see what everybody says. I circled back at the very end and picked both offense and defense.
You did that last year, too.
Well, I thought
It's fine. We'll keep
yeah.
it. It's more content.
Cool, yeah. There you go. More
Last
content,
year,
that's all that
Owen
matters.
said Seth Anderson. Mitch said Seth Anderson and Y.A. Black. And then,
I was half right.
yeah, half right. Y.A. Black was good last year.
I feel like,
Again, talk about that
I don't
Wisconsin
know.
game.
I
had
feel
Aaron
like I
Graves.
take issue with Mitch calling either Cade or Xavier potential like breakout
But
player.
see,
like
Let's get in the reasoning now.
yeah. So Xavier Wampa, Cade McNamara, my picks for breakout player. Xavier's a starter. Started his first year last year. Obviously had the pick six in the Music City Bowl in his first career start. But he kind of gets lost in the shuffle, right? Because you have so many amazing players on this defense. That he has a pick against Utah State, and he had I think a broken hand at some point. And I think he kept playing through all that, but just doesn't have like. Again, this is
definitely
more of a
levels.
statistical breakout thing of just like, okay, like, is he going to have a few more? Is he going to help with the fact that you've kind of got that lack of experience at one of the corner spots? You've got a little bit, but now he's the guy in the secondary who's one of the veterans. Can he step up and grab a couple interceptions, force a couple more fumbles, something like that? So that's where that comes from. And then Cade, again, we're 2 years removed now, three seasons since his Big Ten championship run, and we haven't seen him play a ton of football. So I'm not saying it's a full reset, but we're waiting for him to break out in black and gold. We haven't just got a chance to see that. He just hasn't played a whole lot. So that's why I do have faith that he's going to be the dude throughout. Again, nice to have the number 2 you got, but I think Cade is going to silence a lot of these questions and noise from the outside about, is it hot seat, are they going to rotate guys, whatever. This is Cade's job. It's what he came to Iowa City for, and I think he's going to grab onto it and run with it this year.
I guess maybe Mike needed to send a little bit more clear definition of what a breakout player entails. I feel
I like the definition. I think Xavier, highly recruited out of high school.
Yeah.
He started, but he hasn't really lived up to his potential. Neither does Cade here in black and gold.
Right.
So I see the argument, and but
I think we approach it the correct way. So I was thinking, more either first-year guys, early guys who really haven't really seen on the field yet for Iowa at least. That would be Jacob Gill for me. Just thinking that it seems like I hear some conversations about him being a reliable pass catcher this year. If we see a lot of Brendan Sullivan, that for sure is going to be a guy he's looking to a lot to catch passes. I think that if it's not Caleb Brown, then I think that Jacob Gill's the guy to go to, and he could have potentially a special season with 3 or 4 touchdown catches and maybe 400 or 500 yards, somewhere in that neighborhood. My initial thought was, again, like big name coming in, a lot of people talking about him, Reese Dakin. I'm like, he could be potentially a breakout player with how much he's proven that he could be a great punter right off the bat. But anyway, figured zig.
I almost went with Mitch's definition because I had Aaron Graves last year, and I was almost putting it again, or Ethan Hurkett, because I know they played a lot, but they didn't have one of those defensive end, defense tackle, like high number sack levels that you expect from someone who's a breakout player. But then I switched. I was like, I think John Nestor, I think he's going to be a Cooper level guy on special teams. Will he crack that starting corner in his sophomore season? He was on the depth chart. He came in. TJ Hall started the kids' day. Is he going to do that in game 1, be the starter? Will he solidify, that corner role, or will he play that backup cash if he needs to?
I almost went with Herc too, and then I remembered that I talked to his folks in Indianapolis before the Big Ten title game, and that he and Joe, I believe, were tied for the most tackles for loss on the defensive line. I'm like, dude's kind of already broken out. I mean, dude won the game or had the game-sealing play in Ames. Gets the pick that sets up a crazy finish in Lincoln. Those are the moments I'm talking about. Like the moments where you're like, oh yeah, remember Herc had that? And you can point to a player, a moment where that's kind of the breakout thing. And again, that's why I think Xavier will have a couple plays this year where you're like, Xavier changed the tide of the game here or there, and that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about when a breakout, a guy who kind of puts a stamp on it. We know Xavier's name from coming in from Southeast Polk. I think he and again, Cade's going to be more than just the guy who was at Michigan. I think he makes some of those plays, those throws too. Heck, he looked good running the football a little bit. It's an RPO after all. Maybe some of these things, Cade might flash some feet, and I think we'd feel a little more comfortable about it than we did after the fall camp.
I was just looking the other day. I mean, again, with Yosei committing to Iowa, I was kind of checking out, like, again, historical recruits, where he would rank in there potentially, and he'd probably be a top 5 one. But Xavier Wampa actually was a top 10, I think, all-time recruit for the Hawkeyes.
He was a 5-star coming out,
yeah, still kind of waiting for that to happen, waiting for him to have his really big breakout year.
All right, so I got bold on breakout player. We do have a separate sequence and scenario, though, for bold predictions. So here are our bold predictions for the 2024 season. This is always...
You guys, again, are very similar.
Oh, boy. See, but I don't know if it'll be that. So for those that not watching on YouTube, again, please watch on YouTube. I have that Iowa will rush for 2,000 yards as a team. They haven't done that since 2016 when, Owen's bold prediction, they had 2 1,000-yard rushers. They had LaShawn Daniels and Akram Wadley both go for 1,000. Mike says Iowa ends the year top 80 in scoring offense, which I believe would put them about
25
points per game? 25
per game.
points. Why is that number important? I don't get it.
Oh, it's just a random number I thought of,
Just a thing.
No reason.
Didn't make a graphic for it at all. I don't know if Iowa will have 2,000-yard rushers because of the wonderful problem that we've talked about, is that running back room goes 5 deep. So I wouldn't be shocked to see Caleb go for 800. Kamari will probably, I think, could have like a 400 or 500-yard season. Obviously, your all Big Ten running back coming back, and LeSean, he could be a guy that goes for 800 or so again. I think it's going to be like last year. You're going to have a game where one guy pops, the other guy pops, and so I don't know if we'll get 2 guys that will separate themselves in the pack. Some would say you want to see that and have that room of 5 become 2 definitive, and I think maybe we're already a little bit there. But I think there's just going to be a lot of production from a lot of different guys, and I think that's going to be partially by the design and exploration of Lester's offense, especially in the non-con. Is like, again, let's figure out what we got here in the toolbox and figure out what these guys can do. TJ Washington's going to be a guy that can maybe have like 600 all-purpose yards, something like that. And I hate putting definitive numbers on it, but he's a guy that can do everything. Kamari can probably do a little bit of everything. I think you've got a room full of guys that can't just rush, but that can also receive too. And so I think you're just going to have a lot of diverse production from a lot of different guys. And the ground game should be a strength though, and it's struggled to find its footing, so to speak, sometimes in the years past.
Just looking at last year, LaShawn Williams had 821. He led the team. Caleb Johnson, 463. Jazz is the next at 206, and then Kamari Moulton had 93 in 4 games. So
yeah, and of course 85 of LeSean's came on one run there in Madison, 84 or 85 of them, which and he's still mad that he cut. He was like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. I'm like, no, you should have. That was a really good move. Do that more. All right, so those are our bold predictions, MVP picks, breakout player spots. Let's get to the schedule. Again, 10 days away from kicking this whole thing off against Illinois State. So let's take a look at what we've got. I can't remember exactly what we picked last year. I know I had Iowa going 11-1 with a loss to Penn State. I'll stick by that being a pretty darn good, almost right prediction. I can't remember what you guys had, though.
Yeah,
I'm 9-3.
Either.
I think I went 10-2.
You go 10-2?
Yeah, and here I broke it up into 3 graphics.
Sure.
Broke the season down by 4, and so this is the first 4 games, and I'm the only one that's predicting a loss in those games.
Wow. Okay. You like Iowa State going?
That's a popular pick. Yeah.
I think Iowa State. They've got a lot of returning players, returning quarterback. Last year when Iowa played Iowa State, they were still figuring things out. Rocco Becht was the second start,
yeah.
and they'd go on the next week to lose to Ohio, right? Like this is the 3rd game.
Yes.
So they came on strong last year. Abu Sama's now their solid 1 running back. Their offensive line should be a little bit better. Their defense lost some players, but they still got decent enough players, I think, back there. They lost TJ Tampa and I think an interior lineman, but they have, a lot of returning guys. So I just think it's a team where 2nd week of the year, Iowa's offense will still be trying to gel on a new playbook that they're learning. I don't think the offense is going to be quite there. Yeah. I think Iowa State probably has a little bit more scoring there. So I think they edge us out there a little bit.
I would have been very close to picking that same one as a possible loss for Iowa, if not for just the amount of guys that Iowa has back on defense. I think that between that and the game being at Kinnick, I think that they might be able to neutralize Rocco Becht and Abu Sama and Iowa State's offense a little bit more. But that really will be an excellent Cy-Hawk game in week 2. Where's that going to be televised? Where can we watch that one?
Let me think. I think CBS 2.
Yeah.
Our friends at CBS 2.
Our close personal friends. We actually have a meeting here in like an hour and a half to start getting the ball rolling on some pregame and postgame coverage. So that'll be super exciting.
Anything else notable about this?
I think it's more likely they lose to Minnesota than Iowa State.
Really?
Minnesota's going to be tough.
I don't think they're going to be that good this
Max
year.
Rosemer raises the standard of quarterback there substantially. Now, do they have a number 1 receiver? Daniel Jackson's a very good receiver, but Darius Taylor's still in that backfield. And
He's a little banged up, I've heard, in camp. So, but I mean, I think he's going to be there, healthy.
Minnesota's going to be tough. I think that's going on the road, the first game of the year. They've got the Pig, they've got Floyd. That's going to be a fun environment up there. So I think the most likely loss out of those first 4, not that I'm predicting any loss there, going to the Twin Cities and going to that environment is going to be tough.
I would almost say if there's a loss that's most likely to me, it might be to Troy. I think
Troy's
that
a good team.
if you come off of that win against Iowa State, I do think that Iowa's going to be especially motivated for that Minnesota game. That's why I really like them up there. I think that that's a game they really want badly, and so I think that Troy is an easy one to overlook between Iowa State and Minnesota. That
I think this
really
year
solid Group of 5 team.
They lost their coach last year. They have 2 returning starters. I think Troy.
Is that right?
Yeah.
All right,
I think
good
Troy's
research.
going to take a step back, but they have a coach who's not bad. But John Summerall went to Tulane after 2 solid seasons in the Sun Belt. So, or maybe he had 3. I can't remember exactly.
2 starters back?
2 starters on offense. They bring 1 back on defense, but when I looked it up, he was not supposed to start. So 3 overall starters. Who knows what they have?
That is a very small number.
You don't want to overlook any opponent, but I think we caught Troy in a good year. Now last year,
Yeah.
little different story. I think if they would have played us.
Yep. All right.
All right, we'll go to the next 4 games here as we get deeper into the Big Ten schedule. I figured we'd all be lined up with this. And for the next games 5 through 8, we are all aligned. A loss in Columbus against Ohio State, a win at home against Washington. Going to East Lansing, that's going to be a tough one too, I tell you. It's never easy to go into Spartan Stadium, but we've got them winning, and then winning again at home against Northwestern.
Does Northwestern still use that logo with a Wildcat?
I believe so.
Do they?
Is there a different one?
I feel like I usually just see the N.
Oh, okay. I grabbed this from the global folder, so sometimes they have outdated logos like Iowa State and Iowa.
People like throwbacks.
But I dig it. I've got no beef with the Wildcat.
Do you guys think it's even close at Columbus?
Yeah, I think it could be.
I'm a guy who's willing to trust Scott Docterman's knowledge. Before Deacon Hill had his first start last year, he really forecasted what we were going to see for the final stretch of the season, and he was right. He really does think that Iowa's going to compete well with Ohio State. He thinks that could be like a 10-point game or something like that.
I think you've got to flush 2022. You got to just, that was, again, it's strange but true when a defense gives up, if you want to frame it like that, 54 points, and they played maybe their best game of the year. We talked about this a little bit going to Penn State last year too, of just that final score is not indicative of the defensive performance. Like it's a defense built to be out there for a number of plays as long as the offense is doing its thing. And once they get out there, there's that attrition usually after like play 60, 65, and as you get deeper, it's just, okay, now we're just kind of piling on. And anybody who watched that game in Columbus, C.J. Stroud just kind of opened it up there at the end.
I'll ask the question, I guess, this way. What is the most likely thing that you would change on this chart if you guys were to change one thing?
Quick, I want to touch on Ohio State real quick. I think it's going to be their game plan. If their game plan is like Penn State last year, because their offense won't be as explosive, but their defense should be really good. So if they just try and run the ball against us with 2 amazing running backs, Judkins and Travion Henderson, I think they can control the game. That's what I'm kind of nervous about. And I think our offense will be a little bit better than against Penn State. But can they score enough points against their defense to keep it up with it? I'm not too confident in that, at least this early in the year. If it was later, maybe, if they gel a little bit longer. The one thing I would change is Washington. I think since they lost so much talent last year, we know that. They got a new coach, Jed Fish, bringing in Will Rogers from Mississippi State. I just don't know about them. Like, are they going to be good? Or are they going to take a huge step back?
A lot of people dogging them for a team that just went to the Natty, and I know they lose a ton, but there's a lot of guys on that roster that played for a national title last year. I know they lost a lot, and they lost some definitive talent, some generational talent in terms of just who's playing up there. But yeah, that's a tough one. Definitely a tough one. And again, going to Spartan Stadium, Jonathan Smith's a great coach, and Eddie Childs, the new quarterback there. That's never easy to go to East Lansing.
It's never easy. Those Michigan State and Nebraska or Northwestern are the two teams that I kind of don't have a lot of faith in the Big Ten. But if the coach comes in and if Aiden Childs is good, it could be a tricky one, especially on the road.
Sure.
But Washington is just a total unknown. Like, what are we going to get from them?
Yeah, and we did see Northwestern turn it around last year. I don't know if they're really actually going to hang with Iowa at Kinnick Stadium, but they were. If Iowa doesn't make that game-winning field goal, Northwestern is the Big Ten representative in the championship game. So that's a team that, with now a solid head coach, who knows? They could be a team that surprises some people in the Big Ten.
Yep. Any given Saturday in the Big Ten this year, it's going to be wild. All right, final 4 games of the regular season, and we're somewhat aligned. Owen's got the wheels falling off in November here. Owen's got Iowa going 2-2 down the stretch. Mike's got them 3-1. I have them winning out. We all have them winning at home against Wisconsin. Owen believes Iowa will fall in Los Angeles against UCLA. We've got them across the board winning at Maryland. Owen and Mike having Nebraska get the win in Iowa City to bring home the Heroes Trophy. I've got them knocking off the Huskers to wrap up Black Friday at night. I think we can all agree it's going to be chilly.
Yeah. Mike and I must have spent too much time in Nebraska last November.
Dylan Raiola officially announces the starting quarterback today as well.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mini Mahomes, huh? Have you seen pictures from him in camp? He looks like exactly like Patrick Mahomes.
Was that on purpose, do you think?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know if he was like, it was like, oh, whoops.
Yeah, probably. And that's my Mahomes impression.
So I do think, just looking a little bit at UCLA, they've got a ton of guys back on offense, like nothing coming on defense, and so it's going to be very like unstoppable force, immovable object situation where I think that their offense maybe could do something against Iowa's defense. I think that Iowa's defense could do well against their offense, could go either way, but maybe first trip out to the West Coast for Iowa.
Friday night?
Yeah, yeah, that's right. That is a Friday night game.
It's a little different, yeah. And that game is on
Fox 28.
There you go.
Nebraska, I just think that with what's his name, the coach?
Matt Rule.
Matt Rule. Matt Rule in year 2, boy, I really feel like they've got something happening there. Raiola and Rule are rolling in Lincoln, as the headlines might say over at the Lincoln Star Journal. Yeah, I think that could be a time at the end of the year where they come into Kinnick again motivated after what happened at Memorial Stadium last year.
I've heard so many people say they wish Matt Rule wasn't the coach at Nebraska because they like him too much.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like he's a great guy to hear from. His philosophies, I think, are fantastic. What he did at Temple, what he did at Baylor, it's what got him an opportunity in Lincoln after struggling in Carolina in the NFL. They'll be tough. I think they get it done. Watch out for Maryland. Watch out for a trip to College Park that late in the season.
Back-to-back road trips on the coast. Like I flirted with the loss there, but I think UCLA is going to struggle a lot this year. Maryland, I think, will be a decent team, but I just couldn't pull the trigger. I think I was going to be able to pull it out. And Nebraska, if this was, you want Nebraska early in the season. If they're clicking at the end of the year, their offense, I think, and their defense, they have just enough coming back. I think they're going to be a dangerous team. And Iowa and Nebraska is always close, no matter if they're a good team or bad team. Last year they were 4-8, and they still nearly beat Iowa.
Yeah, I don't think there's been a blowout in that game since 2018 or 19 was like Noah Fant and T.J. Hawkinson. Akram had a big game, so maybe that was 17. I remember there was quite a bit of scoring at one point, but yeah, otherwise it's Keith Duncan field goals, Marshall Meter field goal. It's just always. But that's what you want. You want those competitive games, especially for trophies.
I feel like these overall records, though, probably reflect pretty similarly what we had last year. I don't know for sure. We could maybe.
I look back on our feed. Okay. We both had 9-3. You had 11-1, and where did we finish? Right in the middle.
So there we go.
So you've got 10-2 this year, right?
10-2, yes.
You got 10-2. Do you have 8-4? Did I see that right?
9-3.
9-3. Okay. Where do we think they finish in the Big Ten at 9-3? You've each got them having 2 losses.
No, I have 3 losses because I have Iowa State. My bad, 9-3.
But 2 losses in league.
Sure.
In league, 2 losses, yeah.
Probably don't go to Indy, but
I think at 9-3, they're not making the playoff. I really do.
you think at 10-2 they make the playoff?
10-2, I think it will hurt them that they're not a blue blood. I think a lot of teams like Alabama, Penn State will get in at 10-2, but I think teams like Iowa, maybe a Kansas State, teams like that will have to be 11-1. And I've been racking my brain on this. I have no idea how the committee is going to do this. It's going to help them a lot in the Big Ten.
Sure. And it's going to depend when these losses come. If Mike's prediction comes true where they lose against Iowa State and at Ohio State, and then they win out the rest of the way, I think they get into the CFP. But if my prediction comes true where they get 2 losses late in the year against UCLA and Nebraska, losing 2 of their last 3, I think that's something that keeps them out. And I think that's why the Nebraska game would worry me so much as a Hawkeye fan, because last year Iowa was able to go over there and keep them from getting into a bowl game. This year, Nebraska might come over and have a chance to knock Iowa out of a shot at the CFP.
That could very well be, for both teams, a playoff deciding game.
Yeah.
That's going to be as big of a game as you could ask for. It was on CBS last year, I believe. It is not this year. It is not this year.
So don't watch it.
Yes. We've kind of just dabbled in our next topic. Best case, worst case scenario. Joel Klatt, I've talked about his podcast. He did this week of just like what would make a successful season for a certain team, and he talked about Nebraska and Michigan, Ohio State, a few others. But if we want to kind of frame it like that, but what is the best case scenario for Iowa? The best season we think, the ceiling, so to speak, and what would be a wheels fall off situation? Mike, we'll start with you.
I think the best case scenario, because you have a relatively, I don't want to say soft, but like a relatively manageable schedule. It's ranked 47th according to Phil Steele. And that's just like, there's only 20 Power 4 schools that have a weaker schedule. So I think if you win every game besides Ohio State, 11-1, that's the best case scenario.
Which
would
puts you on the doorstep of a trip to Indy and gets you in the playoff maybe regardless.
See, I think it's interesting because I think at 11-1, I think Ohio State and Oregon could still be 11-1 there too.
Yeah.
So what happens when there's a 3-way tie and Ohio State and Oregon played each other, Iowa and Ohio State played each other, Iowa's 0-1, Ohio State would be there because if they beat Oregon. I guess it depends on who wins that game. But who would get that 3rd spot? I don't think the Big Ten's released those tiebreaker rules.
I don't know.
I haven't seen them yet. So that would be just a weird scenario to look out for. But a playoff berth nonetheless.
Best case scenario, playoff berth. You agree?
Yeah, I think that I put for my best case scenario probably a 1-loss regular season. Maybe they get a chance to beat Ohio State on the road, and maybe that loss comes against UCLA, Nebraska, something like that. It just is very hard for me to see this team with an offense that's recovering from some injuries and still figuring itself out with a new OC. I just have a hard time seeing this team go undefeated in the regular season. But yeah, that was my best case, is probably going to the Big Ten title game and losing in the first round of the CFP.
Yeah, best case to me is they go undefeated, all the stars align, and you go into Columbus and you win that game. I'm not saying that's likely, but I think absolute ceiling is you're able to run the table. Maybe you lose your first one in the Big Ten title game. Oregon's just so good. But I wouldn't be surprised if they go in with one.
So you think Oregon is the top dog in the Big Ten?
It feels like the team to be, as much as the Big Ten veterans. Maybe you don't like hearing that the Pac-12 new guy rolls in. I think they're great, and they've they were a couple losses from Washington away, or to Washington last year away from being the CFP, and they would have been a heck of an out in the CFP last year. So I think best case scenario for Iowa is running the table regular season. You get the playoff, maybe even host a playoff game. I think that'd be pretty wild. And welcome to Kinnick Stadium in December. You thought it was fun in November. I think that's best case. Worst case is that you get injuries again. The offense doesn't click. The defense, even with all that experience, maybe offenses go up against them a little differently, attack a secondary that has a little less experience than it has in years past, particularly at corner. And this team goes not even 9-3, maybe 8-4, something like that. Still goes to a bowl game, but boy, you just get kind of those flashes of 2010 again, where you had so many guys back. The offense was really good, but it's just all those. It comes down to, again, 1 or 2 plays here and there. You lose a couple one-score games, and all of a sudden, a team that was on the precipice of 10-2, 11-1, 12-0. You finish 7-5. You go play in the Insight Bowl. Now you get an awesome win in the Insight Bowl in 2010 and wrap things up. But I think that's the worst case: is you lose 4 games, you go play in a non-playoff bowl game. You're not competing for a Big Ten title, not even in that playoff discussion. But again, that worst case is a lot of other teams' dreams. So I don't think we're going to be talking about missing a bowl game or anything like that. But I think that's your ceiling. That's your gap to work within here, starting on August 31st.
My worst case was even more pessimistic. I think I said about 6-6. I mean, the last year was just such a weird year in that so many things just kind of, even though their offense is so terrible, things just kind of went right just here and there. You know, the Nebraska game was just took 3 miracle plays at the very end just to win that game in regulation. Northwestern, game-winning field goal at Wrigley. I mean, just so many
goal line stand.
One little thing happens differently, and it's a totally different record for the season.
Illinois and Rutgers as well. I mean, Illinois, it was a 2-point game, or I can't remember if they were losing or winning, but Caleb Johnson had that touchdown run. I think it was tied at the time. Rutgers was 6-0 in the fourth quarter. Yeah. They ended up winning 22-0, so it looks close. But that fourth quarter was a little sus.
So,
as the kids say.
There's a realistic possibility they could start 2-3 this year. You know, maybe they lose to Iowa State. Maybe they lose on the road to Minnesota and then at Ohio State. I mean, there's a lot of games that could go a different way, and this team could be 6-6, which would, again, still get them into a bowl game. But yeah, you would just be looking at all of the unmet potential when you have just a dream scenario with a defense, and you look back and you're like, boy, we really squandered that opportunity.
Yeah, 6-6 I think is the floor. I think 8-4 is 8-4, 9-3 is that's what I think they'll do, and then 11-1 is that dream scenario.
Yeah.
So, but a lot of these games I think in last year, you saw it on the field. Just Iowa came up on the winning side of them. I think Nebraska, Maryland, Wisconsin, Washington, Minnesota, those are all games where I could see Iowa losing, but I think they'll win most of them. So you never know. If the offense doesn't find its rhythm at some point in the season and you're relying on your defense again to get turnovers and points, it's going to be toss-ups and coin flips, and you're not always going to come on the winning side of those.
There's a national narrative that the Big Ten is just super top-heavy and that the only teams that are really in the hunt for the playoff, Iowa's kind of considered a dark horse because of the schedule and just what they have back and everything, but it's basically Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State. Those are your only 4, and then everybody else is just kind of also rans. Wisconsin's going to be really good. Second year under Luke Fickell. Tyler Van Dyke is a very good quarterback. Watch out for Tyler Van Dyke. And everything else they've got back there in Madison. Again, I think Minnesota is going to be tough. I think Northwestern showed what they can do. Everyone's sleeping on Purdue. Purdue's probably, people are talking like Purdue's going to be the worst team in the Big Ten. Have fun going up against Purdue because they're going to catch somebody at some point. Maryland's going to be tough. UCLA, even as they try to figure out their new identity under Deshaun Foster, that's going to be a team that, could catch somebody at some point. USC is going to be very, very good. Very, very good. It's a Lincoln Riley offense, folks. Have fun watching them go to 10 wins. And people are like, oh, what happened with USC? It's USC and it's Lincoln Riley. That's what they're going to do. It's going to be a very, very good conference where, again, any given Saturday, somebody's going to knock off somebody and there's going to be a lot of chaos and people are going to wonder why such and such a team lost 2 or 3 games. And I think there's just going to be, especially getting in November when I think you're going to have quite a few teams that are on the precipice of chasing some stuff. It's going to be a fun November. And Iowa gets to have one of the marquee games in November, at least one of the marquee games. So the Big Ten is going to be quite the ride. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Who do you guys think is, that jogged my memory of a question, who do you think is going to be the worst team in the Big Ten? I'm looking at the standings, and it does seem difficult to predict. That's why I think Purdue's down there, and I'd almost tend to agree because they have a new coach, or is it a second-year coach? And Northwestern, I just don't know if they're going to have the horses. I think everything came out last year correctly, but who's it going to be? Indiana has a new coach who I think is really good. Came from Ohio, I believe. So in Illinois, Brett Bielema, I think they'll be floating around that bowl win. That's tough to gauge.
Yeah, it is tough, and I think maybe one of those teams you just listed ends up being the quote-unquote worst, and I hate to even put that label on it because I think all of them are going to be tough in their own ways. I don't think there's going to be a team where you just watch them at any time and just go like they're hapless. I think they're just everybody's got their own little strength or something they can build on. So I'm not sure who it'll be, I think maybe one of the 3 or 4 that you just threw out there. But it's going to be a tough league. It's going to be a really, really tough league.
I think Rutgers has a chance to maybe be down there. I mean, again, you guys probably have followed a little bit more of the preseason Big Ten stuff, but
Rutgers has a really soft schedule.
Really?
Yeah.
Ethan Kaliak-Manis, the former starter at Minnesota, is now the starter there.
Outside of Virginia Tech, they play their toughest Big Ten game is at USC, at Nebraska. They play Washington at home, Wisconsin at home, UCLA at home, Minnesota at home, Illinois, Michigan State on the road.
Right.
So yeah, I could see 8 wins there. You know, maybe not an 8-win team though.
All right, so a couple weeks ago, I inadvertently started to tease a podcast that hadn't formally been announced. Now it has been, so we can move forward. This is really, really cool. So there's a new triple option podcast. This is kind of coming out of the family of podcasts that we're a part of. And look at this lineup if you're watching on YouTube. Mark Ingram, who, lest we forget, was almost a Hawkeye. I believe Iowa was in his final 2 or 3 when he was coming out of high school. Of course,
I don't remember that.
Went and won the Heisman at Alabama, of course. Urban Meyer, who got his worst loss as a head coach, I believe, at Kinnick Stadium in 2017. Woodshed, we all remember that. And also did very well as a head coach himself at Florida and Ohio State and Bowling Green in Utah and everywhere else. And then Rob Stone, who's as good as anybody when it comes to hosting and being a sports broadcaster in the game. They are launching the Triple Option podcast. First episode actually just dropped today, so wherever you listen to podcasts, wherever you listen to Eye on the Hawks, Triple Option's available to you. And again, talk about a guy who's got a ton of experience and is a fun guy to hear talk about X's and O's. And in Urban Meyer, Mark Ingram, who's been to the top of the heap in so many different ways and had a nice little career in the NFL as well. And then again, Rob Stone, who's just a great point man. Anytime you're talking about a sports or a football broadcast, that's going to be a fun show. That's going to be a really fun one.
Yeah, and what a first guest to have on their show, right?
Nick Saban.
You joke. You weren't here in the morning. That's how Netta pronounced it in the newsroom before she read it on. Hopefully she said it.
Anchor.
And so I'm like, okay, it's Saban. She doesn't watch football, so we can't blame her too much.
But no, yeah, what a first guest. And again, talk about a guy who it's so fun to listen to him talk about the game. So great for guest. We're still working on getting Coach Saban. Maybe one of these days he'll answer our calls. But yeah, that'll be a fun listen. And again, we're 10 weeks or 10 days out from the start of the football season. I think everybody's just trying to consume everything they can at any given point.
Yeah. Does Mark Ingram, this is totally random, have one of the best photos of all time when he stood next to Derrick Henry and looked like a child? That's a Heisman Trophy winning running back.
Oh, you looked that up. What, is that from 2017?
That's a good call. I actually don't know. I just Googled it. It looks, I'm not sure, but one of those years where Derrick Henry was just a man.
So this
has been.
This is an article, and we're pushing an hour on this, so thanks for sticking with it, everybody. This is an article from old Black Heart and Gold Pants from back in the day from 2012. What if Mark Ingram had gone to Iowa instead of Alabama? So there was a situation where I believe he was considering coming to Iowa City and playing. I know they were part of the recruiting and whatnot. So yeah, little connection there. Would have been wild. But again, Iowa with Sean Green in 2008. Today's his birthday, I believe.
Mark Ingram?
Right.
No, Sean Green.
Oh, Sean Green, yes.
And Archie Griffin. I didn't realize they share a birthday. So just something about August 21st.
The recruiting list on Mark Ingram's ESPN page has Alabama, Arizona State, Iowa, Michigan State, and Wisconsin. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Pretty cool. So go listen to the Triple Option. Keep listening to Eye on the Hawks and all those other podcasts as you get ready for the season. Final plug of our socials as well. We talked about this top of the show. We talked about this every show. We're just going to keep hammering it until we get those views up and those downloads up. Eye on the Hawks on Twitter. Iowa's News Now on YouTube and Instagram. We will be back next Wednesday after hearing from players for the first time in a little while, going into the Illinois State Week. That's on Tuesday. Coach Ferentz as well with his afternoon presser. We'll stream that stuff as well, the afternoon presser on Tuesday afternoon. But final thoughts as we wrap up our season preview and get into actual game day and game week analysis and previews coming up in a couple days.
Just so much excitement around what the offense has to bring. I mean, as it was last year, there's a lot of knowns around what the defense has to offer, and then conversely, just a lot of unknowns around the offense. So just very intrigued to get out there for that first game. I mean, even though it is against an FCS opponent, but see what Cade McNamara and the offense have to bring under Tim Lester now.
I'll do even better. I'm excited this Saturday for Florida State, Georgia Tech in week 0 action, and then I'm going to lay some money on SMU to cover a big spread against Nevada, who I don't think is any good this year, at least according to my football podcast. That's the intel I'm getting. So, but no, I'm cautiously optimistic about the offense this year. A new system. Once we get to see actual game film, we'll get to see what we actually have in that offense. And I know it's going to take some weeks, but got to start with first week, and that's going to be super exciting next week. Can't wait for every day. I'm going to Ames to work on a special for our Cyhawk on Monday with Logan, and Tuesday we got all that press availability. We'll hear maybe a starting quarterback is named officially with Cade, and then just the rest of the week with Fry Fest on Friday too. Should be a good week.
Yeah, we've got some. We just got some news from Fry Fest organizers yesterday as well. Obviously, we'll have our booth down there and everything, but some really cool news that we'll maybe formally announce coming up next week. But some really, really cool stuff, and an opportunity for kind of a special Eye on the Hawks content dump there that we're really, really looking forward to. I'm just looking forward to that first swarm, that first play in a back in black. I was talking to somebody not too long ago about the 2021 one after the pandemic and fans being back in. That was a special moment.
Yeah.
And every year, hearing that first entrance is always fun. So we're 10 days out from it. We'll be back next week with Eye on the Hawks and preview that opener against Illinois State. For Mike and Owen, I'm Mitch. See you next Wednesday on Eye on the Hawks.